Hello everyone, it's Spessy, and we've got the patch notes for 9.5. Let's have a gander. Regis is at the top. I think that's a strong suggestion that he is going to be the main man for the journey tomorrow. No great surprises if that is the case. Otherwise, CDPR is seriously trolling us, which would honestly be pretty funny. And it is spooky season, so we've got the Halloween event. I'm going to be doing a video tomorrow on that with Regis as well. But without any further ado, let's crack on. There's a couple bits mentioned up here, such as the games are going to be sped up somewhat. The Halloween event is there as well as a sale. There's going to be a brand new reward book tutorial page for new players with intention of helping them improve their starter deck. So I'm going to be posting a video on that as well next week. And there's new effects for cooldowns, counters, fees, and insanity costs. I'll also post a video on that, I guess. So yeah, pretty cool. Mushy Truffle got nerfed. Now there's a lot of changes here that we already knew about. I posted a video yesterday where a lot of these patch notes were leaked. So I'm not going to talk in great detail about all of these. Going to really focus on the ones we didn't know. So they're going to be ones that were ability changes. Okay. So if you're interested in more in-depth discussion after watching this about the other cards, head on to yesterday's video. So Mushy Truffle got nerfed. Definitely deserved. We are still going to talk about all the cards, but we're not going to go into great detail about all of them. So what I'm going to do, going to go over here. I've got all the new cards that have been buffed or not buffed, nerfed, that's the word. So let's start off with monsters. We've got Old Spear Tip. Again, the patch notes are in the description if you want to open those up as you go along. And Old Spear Tip, he has had his provisions changed from 12 to 11. Honestly, more impactful than it might first seem, because this card does have a lot of synergy with cards like Witch's Sabbath. You've got the She Who Knows. Ozeril also caught a buff as well. Ozeril's now going to be chilling at 8 provisions. So Old Spear Tip, Ozeril package, Ozeril, bit more of an argument to run that over Egon, which is obviously 10 but 13 points, but has the big downside of the armor situation. So Old Spear Tip, I could honestly see it being included in some more decks. Now Ozeril being 8 provisions at first doesn't seem like a huge deal, it's just a provision. But it's also important to remember this is a graveyard hate tool, so it's really good against Ryogan, it's really good against Melusine as well. And we know that graveyard hate's been really, really important recently in Gwent, so I think Ozeril catching a buff is honestly great. It's like a control tool almost for monsters. Instead of having to run a Squirtle, you could just run your Ozeril. It's good for Kelly decks as well. Sabbath does have, Witch's Sabbath that has some anti-synergy potentially because you're going to want to consume cards. But yeah, if you want to play She Who Knows, and you want to play Ozeril on the same deck, you're not going to want to use Egon. That's maybe where Old Spear Tip is going to find its own, or really have its own slot, because obviously Egon with She Who Knows, all the armor gets removed and it just dies. So yeah, I think that's where you're going to be using Old Spear Tip. Definitely think Ozeril is a banger card. Detlef also caught a point buff, but Detlef is played 3 times basically, right? So it's actually a 3-point buff. He's an 18 for 10. With Karantha, that's also going to be an 18 for 9. I think this is now going to be good enough to be included in your Overwhelming Hunger decks. And there's a lot of other cards that have been buffed for Overwhelming Hunger. It's probably the first deck I'm going to be trying out tomorrow, so look out for that video. I think this card's good. I think it's definitely worth including. It is going to fight for consumes, but honestly, a lot of the consumes have been getting buffed. Things like the Harpies as well with Mushy Truffle, even though Mushy Truffle caught a nerf, I still think are good enough to run. I just wish that Overwhelming Hunger still had 3 leader charges. Vi kind of killed Overwhelming Hunger for me, but hopefully these changes are going to push it in, well, they definitely are going to push it in the right direction. We'll have to wait and see how much they push it. Hopefully enough. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, this card's great now. And, makes sense. It's a vampire. Maybe we see some more vampire synergies coming through soon. Hopefully. I know it's a popular opinion. Maroona also caught a point buff. This is just a point because you don't summon her multiple times. But it's a nice buff nonetheless. She's a card you would be already using in Overwhelming Hunger, so it's basically just a point extra for Overwhelming Hunger. Happy days. Goliath is now 7 provisions. Monster Mill has got buffed, guys. Wow, what a great moment. The main thing to bear in mind with Goliath is it is now an option of Penitent. So Penitent can pull Pugo, which would be good with Ozeril as well, right? That's like probably the best target. You've also got the Witch Apprentice, not Witch Apprentice, the Ratcatcheress in at 7, which would be another Aussie target. This would also be another one, right? So Monster Mill gets a provision, but also Goliath off Penitent is definitely something to bear in mind that you can do. I think Penitent with Pugo and with the Ozeril is looking pretty nice with that Ozeril buff, I must say. This is the big one, guys. This is the new auto-include for monsters. The Toad Prince. What's happened to it, you might ask? Well, if you're following along, you'll already know. It's gone from 3 to 4. So rather than consuming a 3 power unit, it's gone from a 4. Now, bear in mind a card like Professor in the past, where this same changes happened, where Professor went from damage 3 to damage 4 with its bounty, and it went from being terrible to auto-include. Well, Toe Prince is very much the same, okay? It's just incredibly, incredibly strong. The difference between consuming a 3 and a 4 is massive. Like, if your opponent is now playing a Bannard Student, guess what? Your Toe Prince can suddenly answer it, and that is going to be, what, 11 tempo? Well, obviously it's that little bit of control. And Monsters is a faction that really lacks control. The most obvious comparison with this card is Adastriga. Adastriga, you have to have dominance, and it's just damaging. Okay, it's cheaper, and it's 2 points more, but, you know, this is actually more tempo because you're consuming it, you're getting its power, right? So, yeah, this card is absolutely nuts. You can also use it as a consume on one of your own cards that's 4 power or less, so something like a Harpy Egg, right? If there's nothing to consume on your opponent's side of the board. But it's not just Overwhelming Hunger Death Wish decks that are going to include this. I think it's auto-include. Also, interesting in Carabalist decks because you could use it as a control tool in round 1, or honestly, like sometimes in Kelly decks, you just do want to consume one of your own cards to have less units on your side of the board, right? Because there is some anti-synergy in your Kelly round with the fact that you're going to be consuming your opponent's card and playing one yourself. So that would be bad in your Kelly round to do that. So there's some anti-synergy there, but you just use it in a different round or use it on your own side of the board. Fantastic card. Probably the most important buff of the whole patch. I would say this card is quite possibly going to push Monsters from being one of the weak factions up to being more playable, because I think it's just a great card. You can honestly argue it's overpowered, but I think Monsters needs all the help it can get, and I think because there's limited amounts of cards they buff each time, I honestly don't mind this kind of a card that is just a little bit too good getting added. Whatever, man. This thing kicked my ass for like a whole year in Hearthstone. I couldn't kill it, but I got there. And Dragoqueen has got a double buff. It's going to 6 provisions and it's going to 6 power. So it's very comparable to the Were-Rat card, right? Is this card any good as a consume? It's alright. It's alright. It's what, going to be an 8-point consume, basically. If you eat armor, of course, even more. There's not really that many things to eat that have armor, though. That's a big problem with the Dragoqueen. Also, if you've got some sort of swarm deck, you could get it going. If it was to spawn rats, which obviously wouldn't make any sense considering this to be a Dragoqueen, I'd honestly be a lot more interested in it because I think rats fit Death Wish a lot better. Whereas Insect Swarm, you know, if you're playing Arachas Swarm, you're not really too interested in consumes a lot of the time. Maybe you could include some other cards, though, like some other Death Wish cards to get this working in your Arachas Swarm deck. It's a really interesting change. Anytime a card is double buffed, you definitely need to pay attention to it. So excited to try this one out. I love this change, actually. It's really cool. We've also got Fukusha, which got 1 armor. Who cares? And Drown is now going to be 4 provisions. This is a nice change as well. It's a control tool. You can use this in a variety of decks. You can use it in White Frost is one that definitely comes to mind. Maddock decks as well. If you wanted to play Maddock for some reason in Monsters, you could with the Drowner. And also in Keltalis decks, it's a little bit of control, being able to shut down things like Meditating Mages. Bear in mind, with the Drowner, you cannot use this on your own card. So you can't move your Keltalis back if someone moves it, and that's why I'm really glad to see this card. You always pick Strays of Sparla pretty much over a Drowner, so why not just buff the Drowner to 4 provisions? Like, banger card. It's obviously got the Thrive. Really excited to use it. Definitely doesn't seem overpowered, but a nice tech option, particularly in tournament metas where like you might be trying to target a certain deck. Having more movement tools is just going to be nice at 4 provisions. So that is Monsters. Overall, I think Monsters probably got some of the most impactful changes. As mentioned, this what's it called? The Toe Prince, probably the biggest of the lot, I'd say. But moving on to Skellige. Bit of a mixed bag for Skellige. Definitely not as impactful. Let's start off at the top with Fukusha. It caught a point nerf. I think we're all in agreement. It probably deserved a lot more. Honestly, you could have put this at 2 power, and I still think it would see quite a bit of play. Right now, it's still going to be absolutely auto-include, which is kind of a bummer. I really don't like cards like this, which are just in every single deck. Amphibious Assault is another offender for NR, right? This is kind of like the same vibe, right? Yeah, not a big fan, but whatever. Blood Eagle up next. This got a really interesting change that I'm a massive fan of. It is now basically counting the Bloodthirst after you use it. So previously, let's say you had Bloodthirst 2 activated, and then you tried to set up the 3rd Bloodthirst with the Blood Eagle. It wouldn't work. Like, you wouldn't be able to pull an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 provision card, right? But now it does. So yeah, simple. The Bloodthirst condition no longer ignores the target unit when it becomes damaged by Blood Eagle. This same logic has also been applied to the Svalbard Ravager, which is a human, a cultist, and a warrior. So cultist and warrior decks. Well, this is a 7 for 4 if you can meet the Bloodthirst condition, and it's a lot easier to do that now. with that changed logic. But really big change to the Blood Eagle. Happy to see this card getting a little bit of love, because we did see actually people ditching Blood Eagle for some reason in Warrior decks for a little while. People went for the discard package, and Warrior's been getting a lot of buffs, slowly but surely. A lot of the nerfs that they originally had when they were super powerful have been reverted. There's a few more to come later on. Wild Boar of the Sea, another card that got a big nerf, or a point nerf at one point. It's basically just back to where it used to be. It's a 4/4/11. It's getting a point. I'm excited to try it out. We'll have to wait and see how much of a difference it makes. 1 point is a big deal for sure at this amount of provisions, but it's obviously not seen a lot of play recently. Is that 1 point going to make the difference? Probably not when cards like Fukusha exist, unfortunately, is the truth, because you're probably just always going to run a Fukusha no matter what deck you're using instead of a Wild Boar of the Sea, because who needs synergy when you just have OP cards? Not a fan personally, but whatever. At least it's got enough, right? Skellige, 6 provisions. Cool, he got a buff. Nice. I like it. Comparable to a Greatsword, obviously with a downside, but Greatsword also has a downside. It's a nice Blood Eagle target still. Yeah, he wasn't seeing any play for a long time, so I'm happy to see Skellige get that point. Yeah, nice. Arnvold also got a couple of points. He is now, I think, 6 power, if I'm not mistaken. Card kind of sucks still. I was talking to Shamir about this one. It's at best an 11, I do believe. If you change a 1 power card to a 6, it's going to be 11 for 6. A very conditional 11 for 6. Yeah, it's no good, I don't think, unfortunately. Primal Savagery. I think this is probably the biggest change for Skellige, one that you're going to see probably the most, because any time a 5 provision card goes to 4 provisions, it's so much easier to include in your deck, with 4 provision cards basically just being free. So yeah, this card is a banger. It's an 8/4/4 if you can set it up, and there's a ton of ways to set it up with Skellige, with damage pings, with things like hunters, things like ships. I think this card is really good. I think almost every SK deck is going to be wanting to play this one. Maybe just a one-off, because obviously it can brick. It's definitely got a big downside, but it's just really bloody good. Really great card. Cool. Demon Smuggler has now got Zeal. So card's kind of bad still, to be honest. It's going to be an 8/5, I do believe, which is pretty good, but you do need a ship. Is it an 8/5, or am I tripping? Yeah, it's an 8. It's honestly pretty good. 8/5 with 2 damage that can set up things like Bloodthirst and set up the ship. What's this ship called? The Wild Boar of the Sea. Yeah, honestly, I think this card's pretty decent. I'm going to definitely try it out. And pirate decks. The Drummond Villager, this is another one of those cards that got its nerf basically reinstated. It's giving 4 bleeding again. The big problem with this card, we had a really interesting discussion with it on the stream earlier, is a lot of the cards that you would rely on getting full value from this just don't seem as impressive anymore. The main one being this 4 provision veteran card. It's just a little bit whack now, so to get maximum value off this card, you want to use it with a card that has Veil, but this Invader's just kind of pants these days. It just doesn't feel very good. It's a 7/4 in round 3. That's just not cutting it, mate. It's just not cutting it at all. But you've got Harold, obviously, in round 3 has Veil, so if you can get one of these in your graveyard, there's some, it's an 8-point card for 4 provisions with the Warrior tag, so 9 points in your hat with Harold is not bad at all. You've also got some other synergies like Harold, his little dude, his skull. Also, you could use it on a Demon Light Longship. When it's at 1 strength, you could give it bleeding and then use that last ping from the Demon Light Longship. So there's definitely some things you can do with it. A little bit awkward though, but really exciting to see. I think this card getting buffed is one of my favorite changes. All right, that's Skellige. So overall, Warriors getting buffed. Yeah, happy to see Warriors getting buffed. I'm definitely going to be trying them out. I was close to trying them out this patch, never quite got round to it because they have had a lot of additions. Unfortunately, it seems I lied and I completely forgot to do the NR cards, but the others have been done, so apologies. First off, we've got Reynard Otto. I think this is a huge change. This is honestly a massive buff to Uprising, which is massively overshadowed by Inspired Zeal. Unfortunately, probably the biggest thing to note from this is this card wasn't nerfed, which honestly I'm pretty disappointed by. I want to see this card nerfed significantly. It's just massively incentivizing the whole faction to play Inspired Zeal. Like Fukusha and Amphibious Assault are these auto-include cards I don't really like because they're just in every deck. But and this is a bigger offender because those cards can be used in any leader and any deck, which is kind of bad as well. But this is just really incentivizing you to play Inspired Zeal because it's just so good. But I digress. Reynard Otto has now been given Formation, and an order. So what does the formation do? Well, it means you can play him in the back row for an extra point, which means he's harder to kill, which is really important, right? The difference between 7 and 6 is huge. Things like Parasite, Trial of the Grasses, there's a lot of things that deal 6 damage, right? So that is a big buff. But the fact that it's got an order basically means that the deploy and the just the normal ability aren't competing for value anymore. You can get value from both. So previously, you would basically play it proactively, or you'd play 2 other cards and then play him for max value, but now you always just want to play it in the back row and then use the order at a later point for max value. So it's basically got 3 extra points on Reynard. 3 points, guys! That is a lot of points. Now, Reynard has some really cool synergy in Swarm decks, mainly with Meve as well, which is, quite thematic, because if you've got your Reynard stuck down on the board and you play your Meve, jobs are good and she gets boosted instantly. Obviously, with Uprising as well, with Scytheman, very, very cool. Really, really excited for this change for Reynard. We also got Thala. He is chilling now. He got a double buff as well, which again, double buff's always pretty important. He's now 7 points and 7 provisions. Mate, we saw Monster Mill get buffed. Now we've seen Northern Realms Mill get buffed. CDPR, mate, let's go. These decks suck, just in case you guys weren't aware. They're meme decks. This card's really bad, though. I don't really understand what the point of this card is. It extends the round, so with cards like Patience cards, you could get a slightly longer round with the Visigord as well. It would play for a few more points. You can also do the cheesy stuff with Stregobor with this card, where you'd play Stregobor and then you'd play Thala front row, click the formation, then you'd be at 9 cards, your opponent would be at 10 cards if you went first. Stregobor draws you a card and it basically mills a card for your opponent. So it's one of the only ways of getting card advantage. Previously, this card was just like way worse than Matter though, right? Because Matter is working in a similar way, but it draws your best card and your opponent's worst, whereas Thala didn't. So now Thala is, a couple points better than Matter if you play it in the background, a couple provisions more. So at least there's some logic to the card, right? And you can shoot it off Amphibious Assault and Precision Pincer Maneuver. So yeah, I mean, it's a buff. I don't really understand what this card's doing. Another really pointless change, to be completely honest, is Vandergrift. Listen, I'm all for changes. This card just needs a rework. We've got flipping 4 provision resilience. So what this card's doing at 8 provision still, I'll never know. But, it's whatever. It's been buffed. Kind of just a pointless change, to be completely honest. Not really interested in that one. Especially when you think Vandergrift's Blade. I'm hoping we get some Knight synergies, right? Because Vandergrift's Blade is a card that does exist to promote Knight synergy. Where is it? Is it like 6 provisions these days or so? I actually have no idea. Does it even still exist? Don't tell me it's 8 provisions. Oh my lord! So Vandergrift got buffed, but Vandergrift's Blade continuing to be forgotten about. That is really sad. But whatever. Never mind. Can't have it all. By the way, I do think there's a lot of changes here, so I'm not going to be. I'm not coming off as ungrateful, but I'm sure you guys can understand where I'm coming from. Vernon Roach got a point, a provision rather. Vernon Roach, a card that when Dijkstra existed in Gwent, which was basically had the same ability in beta, if you guys didn't know. Exact same card, but it was Dijkstra. But then when Homecoming came out, Vernon Roach got it. It's never been the same in Homecoming. The reason is, in beta Gwent, there was golds, silvers, and bronzes, where you only had 4 golds, you only had 6 silvers. So being able to thin your deck with Roach was just good, right? You're just playing more cards, that's good. But now with the provision system, where you polarize your deck, you often end up with provisions stuck in your deck. So Vernon Roach is often just going to be hitting 4 provision cards. So still pretty bad in my opinion, but at least he's been buffed, I guess. You can use him with Handgave Sword. One thing I'd love to see Roach become actually somewhat decent maybe is Han Marvin's Blue Dream being able to be used on him again. This card is another forgotten about card of Gwent. It is just so bad it hurts. It got the Renew treatment right, but Renew's just significantly better with this I don't know what you would call it, this catch. So yeah, Han Marvin's Blue Dream being able to res Roach, then I'd be interested, maybe. But even then, probably not that interested. Visigord got 2 armor. This is a really significant change, because Visigord before, he's just dying to bloody thunder, so you have to use him Inspired Zeal. Now, happy days, he's got a little bit of armor, so again, hopefully pushing Uprising to be a little bit more relevant with this Reynard buff as well. Windhelm has also caught a point. Windhelm's pretty good, honestly, with that extra point. But obviously, he's going tall. He's getting tall punished. So maybe a provision would have been... Well, a provision definitely would have been a bigger buff for Windhelm. 7 provisions is honestly quite an awkward provision cost to include in your deck, because it's just not polarizing your deck very much at all. But the card is pretty cool. I like it. Aratuza Adept got nerfed. I talked about this at length. I don't think this change is doing much at all. It definitely was deserved, but this pincer maneuver deck with the Meditating Mages, while it's caught nerfs to Mushy Truffle and Aratuza Adepts, it's lost 3 provisions. This is a deck that was using bloody a Neuromancy in pincer maneuver. Like, losing provisions for this deck does not do much, if anything, to be completely honest. Of course it does a lot. Like, it's still 3 provisions. 3 provisions is a lot, but like 3 provisions in some decks could make a huge difference. Here, it really doesn't make a big difference. It's kind of the difference between an Neuromancy and an Oral Decree, right? Like, whatever, man. And obviously, Meditating Mage also got nerfed. It's now 3 points, which is a great change. It definitely did deserve. Mate, listen. I actually really like this card. I think it's really fun. I like using it with Draug. What I don't like is the nonsense deck that plays this into all 3 rounds. I'll make a separate video about it because I can't bear. If this deck is still being played against me next month, I'm going to break something, mate. It drives me bloody up the bend. All it makes me do is want to log out of Gwent. I know I'm not alone, but it's now 3 points. Things like Amnesty. There's also the Mage Infiltrator, the little spy that does 3 damage, has caught a big buff, which we'll get onto. So there's big counters to this, but it's just such a binary deck. I bloody hate it, mate. It's so boring. So what is the issue with that? Well, it's actually Tisea. Tisea is actually the issue with that because it turns this from being a carryover card to a sausage maker, basically. It can carry over into all 3 rounds. But it's not only that because it's the synergy it has with the Aratuza Adept, and it is actually Tisea that's the problem with that. I'm honestly going to make a big video on the Northern Realms expansion cards because I pretty much hate every single one of these cards from the expansion for Northern Realms, which is honestly surprising because I really love Patience when it first came out. I like Casting Contest, and I liked this card at first, and I do like these cards, except Alumni just kind of spoils the fun for me. I don't hate Chapter of Wizards. I like Gerhardt. This card is fun, but it's just OP. Istrid's just bad. I don't like this card. Whatever. Maybe another time. It's probably not the moment for it. If you're wondering why, it's all the carryover stuff. I actually like this card as well, right? I actually do. I think it's really cool. I just hate the interaction with Tisea and the all-in deck. But anyway, Meditating Mage has been nerfed. That's good. I just want to see the deck not exist, though. But I still think this card deserves to be 3 power anyway for things like Draug. It's actually just a good card, mate. It's just a good card. But yeah, anyway, moving on. We've got the Carabalist stuff, this is a really cool change. This is one of my favorite changes. These are the changes I love to see because it's actually super... Yeah, it's just a big change to the card. It's got cooldown 3. So it's a big buff, obviously. It's a lot more points. But it's also a massive buff to Stockpile. So if you don't know, Stockpile is the leader ability that reduces the cooldown of all cards on that row by 1. So yeah, just more cooldown cards for your Stockpile, which is pretty cool. Although a lot of the time, you do end up going for your Stockpile in the front row because you put your Reinforced Ballistas in the front. But this is just an interesting card to have in the back row. And it's basically just going to replace the Griffin Witches in that deck, which just didn't really feel like they were very good. Whereas this Carabalista, yeah, nice. Big change. Obviously, it's a siege deck as well. So really, really happy with that. Nero Landsknecht, or Landsknecht, I'm trying to improve my pronunciation, got a point. This is a nice change as well. I honestly think this card's really good now. We had a massive discussion about this one on the stream earlier as well. It's always a nice target off Assault because you can just Assault and play it in the front row for 3 damage. It is an 8 for 5 with 3 damage with an order. So it's like a Bear Witch, right? Bear Witch obviously has Adrenaline and is Deploy, whereas this is you'd have to play this as a delayed order for the 8 points of value. But, it's pretty cool. I think in a Reynard Auto deck, it's going to be really good. Also synergizes with Revenants, which I think you want to play in that deck. Really cool card. I've always liked this thing, so I'm happy to see it get a point. It definitely deserved it. I think it's more of the kind of cards you can include as a one-off in a lot of decks, not a 2-of card, but like one-of, like 3 damage off of Assault is pretty cool. Redanian Knight also got buffed. It's an irrelevant change to anybody apart from if you're new to the game because it's a starter deck card. And the Siege Master got reduced in provisions to 4, but got a point taken away. Oh, man. I'll try this card out in Mobilization because it's a 4 provision card we can use with Moby, but it's 3 power, mate. It's 3 power with an order. It's just going to bloody die. So that's a bit of a disappointing end. But yeah, overall, NR changes. I love the Reynard change. I love the Visigord change and the Carabalist change. The Landsknecht change is cool. I'm happy to see Visigord get some armor. A lot of the buffs just kind of seem meaningless, like Thala, Vandergrift. These cards are just in desperate needs of reworks. Thala as well is like a new card that got reworked recently. I just don't get it. I just don't understand. And then Meditated Mage change. I like the Aratuza Adept change, but flipping to Saiyan, man. Get rid of that deck, please. Please. We'll make a separate video at some point. Anyway, Squirtle. So overall, so far, the changes, I like all of them, but there's an alarming lack of changes to meta decks. That's the problem. But I like all the changes, I just don't like the lack of changes to meta decks. But here we do have a change to meta decks, because the Sorceress of Double Thanos is now 6 provisions. Happy days, it bloody deserved it. It's still a good card. Cool. And fair play to CPR. This is like one of the changes I love to see. It's a proactive change. No one was really asking for it, but it is just an OP card that deserved to get nerfed. Cool. This card got buffed. This is one I'm really happy for. It's something I've actually suggested a lot of times to get buffed. It's now 7 provisions. It did also lose a point of its boost. It's just boosting by 5. Massive buff, though. Big problem with this card, though, is you still can't shoot through it very well, which is pretty painful. Like, you look at Crow Mother, which is kind of like the similar card in SK. You can shoot a Crow Mother with Darren, right? You can't shoot at this card very well unless you play Neuromancy. Talk got a point. Really weird change for Talk. Because he's just getting Tool Punish a lot of the time anyway. It's a point extra for hand buff, which is cool. But I would like to have seen this maybe just start at the left side of your hand, right? Maybe just like with the Devotion, you delete this. Because I wonder if it needs to get the Horson treatment, right? Where this card always starts in your hand because it's just so important for this card to ever be good. Like, this is only a Devotion card, right? I understand they may be worried about making it too good. But I feel like you make this a this Devotion always start at the left side of your hand, right? Maybe. That would still be cool. It wouldn't be a huge Devotion buff, but it would be relevant, right? Whereas at the moment it starts in a random spot and you're never going to play this card outside of Devotion. So I would like to see that. Personally, the Devotion, this part to just become a normal part of the ability, and the Devotion to be something about the starting place in the hand. Brigade. This card has been changed. Not to 4 provisions, which it should have, in my opinion, because there's so many 5 provision movement cards that you already want to play. But instead, I believe it got a point. This card ain't seeing no play. This needs to be a 4 provision card, 100%. Because there's so many 5s, mate. Like, maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe it may... Nah, it just needs to be a 4 provision card, mate. Like, the thing is, you've got Dryad Matrons. You've got Cat Witches. You've got the other one as well, the Sentries. You've got Bountiful Harvest for more Sentries. Even the Cat Witcher Mentor you might want to try and play as a one-off in an all-in movement deck. You probably don't. You would at 4 provisions, but this is the exact problem. I'd love to play this as a one-off card in a movement deck, but at 5 provisions, I just can't justify it, to be fair. Starting at a 6, if you move it once, it's an 8. If you move it more, it's a 10. There's just not that many ways to move it. Yeah, it's not seeing any play, I don't think. Elven War Dancer, however, is definitely a nice buff. It's a 4 provision card, so a point buff to a 4 provision card is very huge. And this is exactly what it got. It got a point. Cool. Nice card in Invigorate, that's for sure. Squirtle overall, probably the most lackluster changes, although it is the only faction, really, which got a significant nerf to its meta deck. There is one other faction, Nilfgaard, which also did. And the Meditating Mages have also been in a lot of the meta decks as well, so they lost a couple points here and there. So all factions have so far lost a little bit of something, apart from Skellige did too, right? So they've all lost a couple of points here and there, but it's not really going to be enough to push these other decks, I don't think, to be like the more competitive options for their factions. Hopefully it does, but I feel like it wasn't heavy-handed enough on these meta decks. But also, to the defense of CDPR, the Open took place like 4 days before this patch happened, so they're not going to be able to base their patch off the Open, right? And it just doesn't work like that. You need to have your patch ready way sooner than that. So yeah. Anyway, Nilfgaard up next. Coup de Grace got nerfed. Mate, love it, guys. So all your Nilfgaard decks have just gained a provision. This card absolutely deserved to be nerfed for a very, very long time. Way too good. 10 provisions is way more fair. It caught like a double buff at some point where it was 10 provisions and the damage moved to 3. It's fine. At 10p, you're still going to see a bunch of plays. Kind of auto-including, well, it is auto-including the Simulate decks. Viper is now giving Spying when summoned from the graveyard. I don't know if that does anything. I guess you could coup it. You can use it with Terra Nova. You can Vincent it if it spawns on your opponent's side. Yeah. Don't know. Alchemist. Oh, let's just go Crossbowman because it's in the order in my deck builder. Crossbowman got a point. So it's starting at a 6. Obviously, in Imperial Formation, it's going to get even more armor. Yeah, it's kind of decent. It's a little slow, but honestly, it's much more reasonable to include in your Imperial Formation decks. There's so many 5p soldier cards, though, in NG. I feel like this is just another prime example of a card I would like to have been seen made for provisions. Because if you look at the soldiers, there's just so many 5p soldiers you want to play. You want to play Albert Armored Cavalry. You kind of want to play Imperial Brigade. You kind of want to play Slave Hunters, right? And Slave Infantries. Whereas when you look at the 4s, and you're like, oh, these kind of suck. So this is an example of a card I maybe would have liked to have just seen being made for provisions, because it would just be a big buff to soldier decks rather than 1 point. But never mind. Ointment is now an alchemy card for some reason. Not an alchemy card, it's now a tactic, which doesn't really make much sense to me. But I guess it's just because it's the only alchemy card, I suppose, in NG. And they just wanted to make it an alchemy. You know, there's quite a lot of things like that where there's, there's Runestone. There's just quite a lot of things like that, though, right? Where there's like raid card, that Primal Savagery, which you looked at as a raid card, which is kind of weird. Tempering is a nature card, so it's just the way they want to do things. So it makes sense to sort of be consistent across the board. Illusionist got a point. Really happy to see Illusionist catch a buff. I do really like this card. It's a fun card. And a point buff is definitely a big deal to a bonded card, right? It's an extra point on Ramon, it's an extra point off Mushy Truffle, so 2 or 3 points extra for your Illusionist. Alchemist got a point, not relevant at all. This card sees no play. The only deck this sees playing is in Tibor Mill, which just isn't a thing anymore, with like the unicorn, where you'd use this with Tibor and Living Armor, and then you'd ointment your Tibor up. So ointment, I think, also did get a point. That's the only place I've ever seen it used. So yeah, they both got a point, which is cool, but not really relevant. It's a point. It's basically a few points to Living Armor decks, which suck. They suck. And another really cool change, this is one of my favorite actually, is the Mage Infiltrator. It is working exactly the same, except it is now also Deathblow going to come to your own side of the board, which is like 2-point buff, mate. It's pretty sick. Really, really cool. Great against Meditating Mages as well, so happy days. That's Nilfgaard done. Last, but certainly not least, we have the Syndicate. Now, Syndicate got a lot of nothing, to be honest. There's not like that much here going on, I don't think, that's going to be significant to pushing Syndicate from being bad to good. But there's a few cool ones that we'll touch on. Well, we'll touch on all of them. Bincy got a point. Nice. Bincy's pretty damn good at 9 provisions now. That could be an important change. Prophet Lebioda. This is also an NR one because it is a dual faction. 8 points? Bruh. Prophet Lebioda is not a Syndicate card, guys. Don't get confused. This is a Northern Realms card. it might say this Syndicate, but it's really not. It's not. So NR got a nice little buff there for shields. Definitely going to try it out. I've always wanted this card to be good. It's always felt kind of bad, but 8 points, mate, that's pretty damn good. That's pretty damn decent. I have to say I'm excited. Blind Eye Apocryphy is now chilling with a boost of 4. This card has caught so many buffs. It's going to be a 6 for 4, but also with the option to heal if you spend a couple of coins. It's a tribute as well. Really good on Igor, right? Yeah, card's kind of cool. It's a Blind Eye as well, which is nice for getting your Siggy tags. There's the Beggar, right, which is another cheap Blind Eye card. Another Blind Eye card that got buffed is Line of Credits, now giving 7 coins. That's actually pretty sick. That is honestly a really, really cool buff. Looking at the artifacts on offer in Syndicate, I'm not sure there's a bunch, but there's a few, right? There's definitely a few. You've got the Hideout, you've got the Sacred Flame, you've got Passy, obviously Megascopes as well. There's Portal, you've got the Mushy Truffle. There's quite a lot of cool ones. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to see that get a buff. Wretched Addict, guys, is one of the more impactful changes, I think, for self-poison. It's now boosting by 2. That is very, very scary. Like, it's like an old witch apprentice, mate. Except, obviously, it's poisoned. So it's a pretty big downside. You know, if you're poisoning it with a Trafficker against Nilfgaard, it's going to get cooed or informated, right? So you're going to have to use a Fist Tech, the normal one. Another card that did get buffed, which I forgot to add here, by the looks of it, but I remembered, is the Mutated Hounds. This card is now 5 points. So that's another buff to poison cards, which is quite cool. The Witch Hunter Executioner is now 4 points, which is a big deal because it's not down to Circle of Lives and things like that. Probably good enough to include in bounty decks now. I tried to avoid it before, but definitely as a one-off, I could see it being worth. Although it is difficult to fit everything you want because none of the leaders got buffed, unfortunately. Carter Blackie now 4 provisions, which is a lovely change. Payroll Specialist is now Tribute 1, which does mean with off the books it's going to be a free tribute, so it's actually a card you include in off the books, but nowhere else. Kalkstein is now 6 provisions, so it's good against Meditating Mages. That is all the changes, guys. I do hope that you have enjoyed the video and the insight. I spent a long time discussing all these cards with the stream earlier. So yeah, what are my thoughts on the patch? I mean, listen, I don't dislike any of the changes. I like them all. I would like there to have been more heavy-handed nerfs to Fukusha, I think is a big one. Just these like to Reynards, which wasn't nerfed. I'm really happy to see the Sorceress nerfed. I'd like to just see more nerfs to some of the cards that just, you know, overshadow their faction, which is a lot of the NR cards, right? I would just like to have seen reworks basically for this whole Patience deck. I kind of hate it. I would like to have seen Fukusha nerfed, Meditating Mages with Tisea interaction reworked. I'd like to have seen Alumni reworked. I'd like to see Messenger of the Sea reworked. But I understand that's a lot to ask for, and I'm not really expecting any of those things. It's just, you know, what I would have in an ideal world. The main thing I'm disappointed by, to be fair, is the lack of changes to the super meta decks, because I just don't think there's really like a whole lot different. And that is like big cards like Vengeance, Fukusha just not getting nerfed or not getting nerfed enough. Yeah. Shout out to CPR for all the changes. You can tell they've worked hard on this patch because there was a really short season, right? It's like a 3 or 4 week season. Excited for the new patch. Excited for the journey. And also I would like to have seen more draft mode mentions because by the looks of it, nothing's happened again, which is pretty long. I'm getting a bit fed up with draft mode. I'm going to make a big video about it. It's got to be top of the priority to sort out because I think it could be great. It's exactly what I need in Gwent right now. It's a bloody fun draft mode. But alas, it's pretty unplayable at the moment. Just, yeah, going to end it there. Hope you enjoyed. I just checked, and for a second, I thought I wasn't recording this whole time. That's the first time I actually checked. That would have been awkward. But yeah, thanks for watching this far. If you did enjoy the video and you watched this far, the secret word for today's video is Ouroboros. Nice one, guys. Check I'm streaming because I might be live on Twitch right now. Bye. Nice one. See ya.